Buying a property is one of the most stressful life decisions you'll ever make. Today's episode looks at a question posed by one of our Facebook group members. As a single person, how do I move past the terror of potentially making a huge financial mistake?
Welcome to Your First Home Buyer Guide, the podcast for first home buyers who want to move it along and become homeowners. But most importantly, it is for you to become an educated home buyer.
I'm Meighan and that was Veronica. We're both buyer's agents and probably old enough to be your mum. But it's a good thing because between us we've got over 45 years experience to share with you and bucket loads of stories about avoidable mistakes. Together we're going to make sure you get unbiased and real information you can rely on. Allow us to guide you on your home buying journey. We want you to become an educated home buyer so that you can stop looking for your first home and actually become a proud homeowner.
We've got loads of great tips for you in this episode, and if you'd like more useful tools, head over to the website homebuyeracademy.com.au, and there you'll get access to our free mini course, How to Price a Property Like a Professional. You will also find the holy grail of home buying education, Your First Home Buyer Guide, the online course for people who want to become educated home buyers. We created this for you to help you get on the right path to home ownership for your first home and beyond.
But before we get into the interesting stuff in this week's episode, we've got the boring bit, the disclaimer. You of course know that nothing in this podcast is to be taken as personal advice. We always recommend getting the advice of an expert in their field who takes the time to understand your personal situation. We've done our very best to ensure that the content is correct at the time of recording. Things change rapidly, so always check with the relevant government authority and your trusted advisors to get the most up-to-date information.
Today we're talking about buying a home on your own. But before we get into that, what is your special house this week, Meighan? It's like a helicopter hat. Yes, oh my God.
For anyone who's watching, I mean, just sit back and dream. This is from my favourite segment of OMG and in Airbnb. This is actually in Kuta. So it is on the beach. It is an old aircraft, and they've turned it into a one-bedroom, absolute luxury, $18,000 a night you spend on this thing. It's 150 metres above sea level. The views are spectacular. You arrive by helicopter. It's got its own helipad there. You've got your own glass front infinity edge pool that you have the beautiful ocean views from, and your meals are prepared by your own personal chef. Now, this is pure indulgent luxury for those who can afford it, but something the rest of us will only ever dream about.
And a novelty. It's like one of those...
Isn't it gorgeous? And it's beautifully done. I mean, it is high-end. It is stunning.
I think I've seen actually this on Insta Reel or something on this. There's foreign correspondent. We're recording this in September. There's a foreign correspondent episode this Thursday on Bali and the changes. And this image of this aeroplane luxury Airbnb basically is there as a symptom of what's happened to Bali.
So it's not traditional Bali. It is not. But oh my goodness me. And it is just beautifully.
You'd really want to love the person you're with because you're a long way from everybody else.
A two-person. It says you can have parties, but there's only two-person accommodation. So you'd have to fly them in and out on your helicopter.
Yeah, I guess if we can afford $18,000 a night, that would be, who cares?
Who cares?
All right, well, we
can only dream.
What we're talking about in this episode, we're talking about the fear of actually buying a property on your own. And it's sort of interesting because, I mean, you and I know this fear, not because we actually we have bought
We
properties.
both have. We will go into that.
We will, yeah. But there are times when I think to myself, God, I've got no fallback here. If I can't make this work, then it's all on me. And I know you've probably felt the same thing.
Absolutely. It was daunting. And all right, so let's have a look at what the question was. So this is in our Facebook group.
Yeah.
And this person has said, this is not a simple one. As a single person on a single income living in Sydney, how do I move past the terror of potentially making a huge financial mistake?
Yep.
I hear you. I hear you and I feel you.
Especially in Sydney too, because it is the most expensive city in this country. And I laugh mostly with disbelief. So we get this. We totally get this, and we're so pleased that you are listening to the podcast. Hopefully you are listening. We're so pleased you've joined the Facebook group where we really do seek to help people become educated home buyers, and it's really important. There's some good stuff here. So, how are we going to help? How are we going to help?
I think it's important to realise that you're not alone. There are people who are buying homes and investment properties on their own. So in 2014, single property buyers accounted for 26.2% of home purchases. But that figure actually dropped a little bit in 2022, which is the last stat I could get on this. So that dropped to about 24.5%. So about a quarter of people who buy properties buy them on their own. And this decline is led, so that difference from 2014 to 2022 was led by a decrease in single male buyers, whereas the single female purchasers have been pretty steady and even increased a little bit in purchasing volume since 2014. Now, I found that really interesting. One, that a quarter of people who buy properties are doing so on their own. So they're making these very, very large decisions, very big financial decisions on their own. But there's actually an increase in women who are making these decisions to buy on their own.
There could be a couple of things there, because you've got to remember this isn't just first home buyers, this is downsizers as well. And so this isn't always the first purchase, and women do live longer than men. So maybe there are these people that are selling the family home after their husband died and they're actually going and buying it.
Possibly.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. But
there is also an increase in split households as well. So, the prevalence of people buying perhaps their first property together and their second property apart, or apart to start with and together and then apart, as we did.
And then of course, single women buying their first property on their own as well, potentially as they move through their career and feel empowered and educated to actually make good decisions. So that is really interesting, and heartened, I guess, that there's women has remained steady whilst single men have decreased. But anyway, let's it is still hard to buy on your own, whether you're a man or a woman or non-binary or however, whatever gender you are, that it is difficult to buy a property on your own, particularly when you're in Sydney. And it does make it feel safer as well. If you're buying with somebody else, you feel like if you're on your own, you lose your job or you get sick or whatever, then you've got to have the insurances in place and all the rest of it to cover you. Yeah. And you don't have a fallback of a partner who's able to shoulder some of that burden over a period of time. So that is very, very daunting. So you've got to have those sort of supports in place. But also you don't have a sounding board to bounce ideas off either. And certainly I know in my business, and you probably find the same thing, Meighan, that quite often our single clients, and most of them women, men don't tend to worry about bouncing ideas off people. I don't know. It just doesn't seem to be something they talk about. But women do tend to say to us anyway, oh, God, we love the idea that you're a sounding board, flesh out my concerns and my worries and all that sort of stuff. So,
and put a little logical overlay over things, because it is such an emotional time, and sometimes people end up in a single space not through their own choosing, and so there's a lot of I remember I bought my first property when I was single, but I did it with my family involvement. I bought my second property when I was in a relationship, and then went on to own a number of properties with that within that relationship. But when that relationship ended and I was there again on my own to buy a property to rebuild my family nest, I really turned to my colleagues, my buyer's agent colleagues, to have that sounding board, because I didn't want to just be in my own head. Yeah. Because you can go over and over and over and over the same information in your head, and end up in analysis paralysis and not be able to move forward if you get caught in that emotional cycle. Because 100%. Buying property is incredibly emotional,
and it's stressful. And when we are under stress, I mean, it is well known psychologically, our options actually start narrowing. We're going to into stress mode and survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, we don't have the luxury of being able to sit back and really carefully, openly consider all the very different options available to us. Sometimes our thinking can get very narrow, and some people that causes them to inaction, and other people it causes them to have action, all right, but it's very ill-considered action.
Yes.
So there are challenges that an individual purchasing on their own will have that a couple won't. But on the flip side, how many couples argue and bicker about priorities and about compromises and about the price they should pay? And,
there are some positives of making a decision on your own.
100%, 100% there are.
You don't have to make the compromises that someone else wants you to make. You only make your own compromises. So, there's pros and cons. And certainly post-COVID, we've seen an increase in the number of single-person households as the rate of separation increased. And it's something that we, talked about in many of the podcasts and also an elephant in the room when I spoke to you and Chris recently. And, you can't, when you're buying a property, we talk about the head and the heart. And it's important that the heart gets engaged when it's a home, because this is your safety. This is where you see yourself having barbecues with friends, maybe starting a relationship. It's where you come to after you finished work, or maybe it's where you work if you're working from home. So there is a very, very important emotional part of buying a home, and that can't be discounted, can't be ignored. But what we want to help, and in this case with this question, I guess what we'd like to sort of get you or guide you towards is how to change from that very emotional state and let the logical part of your brain start to drive some of your decisions once you've found something that you like and maybe you can see yourself living in and creating a life out of. So moving from just the emotional decision-making part, you can't ignore that completely, but you need to let your logical mind take control once you've found a property that you're actually interested in. And there's some things that you can do to get yourself into that logical mindset.
Yeah. And because the thing is that what you don't want also, because the fear is an emotion, and the fear of what could go wrong, the responsibility, the impact of maybe, I don't really know what I'm doing, and I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to be stuck, and I don't want to be trapped. And there's a lot of that sort of going on as well. And what if?
Yeah, so and I've saved so long to get this deposit, and what if I lose it?
Yeah. And so you can go into this sort of inaction because of that. So that, and as I said, fear is an emotion. So, and that's something that can stop you, can drive you, can also stop you. So I think that, this is one of the reasons why we actually teach what we teach, isn't it, Meighan? Because
it is.
There is a system and there is a process. And if you follow the process, you're not rushing. You're actually making sure that you're actually working through everything that you need to work through, so that even though it is still a bit scary, you do move forward with confidence, because you go, I know, I've done it. I've got this. I've thought about this, and I've thought about this with an educated mindset, not just hopeful mindset, or not a limited
throw a dart and hope it sticks kind of mindset. We've interviewed some students, actually, Veronica, now that you mention that, where they've talked about moving from being in a state of, oh God, I don't know, I don't want to make a mistake, I feel really uncertain, to feeling like I've got this and I am making a good decision and I do feel in control of my emotions, and getting to the other end and saying, that actually felt good.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. You don't want to feel like you're jumping off a cliff. Like you want to be
falling down the ravine, I think we called it at one point.
The floaties on, and I jump off that cliff. I know it's not that high. I'm not doing it at night. The water is deep and I've got floaties on, whatever. But, it's
the parachute on.
It's the safety rails around that. And look, I think too that certainly when you work through a process and when you take the time to arm yourself with the right information, one of the big problems, the very first step we teach in your first home buyer guide is to get your support crew lined up. Yeah. There's a lot of people that can actually add to the noise and not help you, because particularly when we're on our own, and particularly women, because we do are more likely to ask for help, right? So we do speak out, we do ask for help. Unfortunately, with property, everybody's got an opinion, and a lot of the men in your life will probably try to mansplain you. And
and some of the women too. I mean, let's not pigeonhole. There's women out there that have done one purchase and feel like they can probably give advice or help somebody else.
100%. And in fact, we just sort of segue a little bit here. the amount of times I've sat down with somebody and, that I've just met and we'll start talking, oh, what do you do? I'm in property. Oh, I just blah, blah, blah. And I've had women do this too. They just volunteer really bad advice.
Yes.
And I always said I was in the industry. I haven't actually said what
it's usually just limited because they don't know what they don't know. It's not necessarily that they're intentionally giving bad advice. No one intentionally gives bad advice.
They just
but
have no idea.
They have no idea. It's the
None.
Dunning-Kruger effect. You have no idea what you don't know. And so therefore you're speaking from a position of expertise that you actually don't hold.
Yes.
But you can put yourself into a position of having some expertise by having a really good plan. So our tips here for our listener, or for our Facebook member and for you as listeners is planning and preparation. I mean, this is just so vital. You just don't walk out the door, have a look at a property and make an offer. That is not the right order to do things in. Very important to think about how you're going to plan, how you're going to prepare. There are some things that you can do, little steps along the way, but then there's a bigger picture about actually putting all of those steps in the right order, doing everything in the right order so that you're not sort of going. I remember we had a student actually in the beta group and he said, I had no idea I was doing step 2, 6, 5, he was going backwards and forwards and didn't realise why he was never getting to 10 because he was doing everything in the wrong order and therefore it was all upside down. So getting things in the right order. And one of the little things that you can do to get yourself started is our 3P tutorial, which is actually working out position, property and price, the 3 bases of compromise. What's important to you and where can you find the potential property that you might be able to afford? Yeah, that's a really entry-level, basic kind of tutorial that can get you started.
Yeah, it's called the Where to Buy tutorial. It basically does what it says on the tin. It helps you work out where to buy. And $39, honestly, I don't know why it's not walking out the door. It should be. So if you haven't already
it is included, of course, in the full.
It is.
That's where people are doing it, yeah.
It is included in the full course. And so, yes, you get that included in $990 if you decide to do your first home buyer guide. But it is such an important process to go through because the simple fact is, where should I buy is the number one question asked by pretty much everybody.
Every Facebook group that you go to, everybody that you talk to at a barbecue, when you're in the taxi or the Uber, it's absolutely the number one question.
Where should I buy? And so it's a little bit more complex than that. It's where, what, and for how much.
Yeah.
So and that's what the tutorial teaches you is actually to work through those 3. We call them the P's: price, property, and position. To work through those three P's in a very systematic, organised way, and researching the market as you do it. We teach you how to do it, and you'll get amazing clarity around where you should focus your search, and that helps. That helps starting things off in the right direction because you feel like I've actually got a map here. I actually got some direction and clarity. And then when you start doing that, you start to see things differently. Others, as opposed to, and one of the things that we often see in our business, Meighan, you probably do the same thing. You meet someone who's been looking for property for a long time themselves without any direction. And one of my team, Rachel, she calls it, they ping pong all over the place.
Yes.
It's like a ping pong.
Yeah, I can actually
over that suburb to another suburb to another. Oh, I'm not getting there. I don't like that. Over there. Oh, and then they spend all their time there, and suddenly they pop up and go, oh, that suburb I was looking at, a month ago, something just sold there that was really nice, and I would have gone for that. Oh, better run back over there. But prices have moved in that time. This is the energy that gets spent by a lot of property searchers that really have no structural framework around that. So that is a really fantastic starting point. Just do the Where to Buy workshop, do our whole program, for God's sake, just bite the bullet and do it all in the right order. But, as a taster, that's really, really valuable.
Absolutely. And it helps you understand your own unique set of compromises.
Yeah.
Now, C is not a dirty word. We did do an episode on compromises and understanding what they might be and how to work out what yours are and how to be realistic about them. A lot of people start with a list of 147 things that they want in the property and they might end up with 3. Okay, so that's what compromises are about. It's actually about working out what can I do without, what can't I do without, And even if I buy in that area, what am I prepared to compromise on versus if I buy in that area, what am I prepared to compromise on? It might be a unit in that area of Bondi, or it might be a house out in, the western suburbs. So getting your unique set of compromises sorted out in your own mind means that when you find something, you can very quickly evaluate whether it meets your absolute base level criteria or not. That's not whether the kitchen is the right colour or, the vanity in the bathroom suits the layout that you want. It's not those sorts of things. It's the big picture things. So you can have a really good set of compromises that you understand how to do your search, and it can help you focus your search a lot better. Now, most importantly is to become educated about the process of buying. It's not, as I said earlier, it's not just walking out the door and starting to inspect property. It's actually getting a structure to understand how to make informed, logical decisions when you're faced with an emotional attachment to a property.
Yep. There is so much in the process of buying that is actually not commonly available. I mean, Meighan, you and I were just working on a carousel for Instagram where we look at all the free resources.
Google search on the free resources.
If you Google, how to buy a home, invariably there's all these 7 steps, right? I've even myself, I actually wrote an ebook, 7 Steps to Buying a Home, some years ago. I must look at it.
And then you realise there were so many more.
Well, no, weirdly enough, my ebook doesn't cover the finance bits. It just actually...
Oh, there you go.
That was the home buying process. But the ones you find online, they invariably basically have 5 steps about finance.
Yep.
And then you got 1 step, which is find a home. And then you got 1, which is negotiate. And it's like, whoa, that finding and negotiating, there is about, I don't know, 7 or 8 steps in there.
Yeah.
In that, right?
Incredibly important.
And that's a bit that it's not commonly available, and that's why we teach that stuff, because it's so important and it gives you confidence to move forward, even if you're on your own.
Yeah, I did a Google search on how to buy a property. I think it was how to buy your first home in Australia, and I think it was the first 5 or 6 pages were all banks. Yeah, because they can afford to do the SEO that gets them up, rated really high. And it's usually the banks that are putting out the 7-step process, because it is about usually save your deposit.
Find out how much you can borrow.
Yeah, find out how much. So it's very money oriented. And that's their lane. That is their area of expertise. But actually buying a property and how to buy a property is so much bigger and more important than just the money side of it, because this is not something that you're entering into for a year or two. This could be a 10, hopefully 15-year relationship that you have with a property and a bank possibly, but with the money that you're spending on that property. So you want to make sure that the actual asset selection side of it is just as important, if not more important, than the bank side of it or the money side of it. That's just one piece of the puzzle.
100%. Now, we're going to put a link to some great articles on the emotions of buying a property, including one that I wrote.
Yeah, that was a good one. I was doing a bit of a search. Well, Veronica's article.
Veronica's article.
Straight up there.
Way to go. There's also an art and science of removing emotions when buying property by the property trio, which is Kate Bakos, David Johnson and Mike Mortlock, all of whom we have interviewed on this podcast. We'll have that link in the show notes.
And, of course, we've got the Elephant in the Room podcast, which you founded and are co-host of. And it was founded on the question, who is really in control when you buy property? There's all about so much information in those various episodes. Very much worth getting onto that list and staying in touch with that podcast. Yeah. So hopefully that has helped our Facebook member, and we certainly do respond to in depth in these questions from our members. If you haven't already joined up, then jump on and get into your First Home Buyer Guide Australia. It's your opportunity to connect with us and ask us your questions. Now, we only put a couple up here. There's a lot that come in every day. Yeah. You get answers from us, which means that you can be sure that you're not going to get led down the garden path.
Yep. Now, quick note, you might think that we cover everything you need to know in these podcasts. A word of warning, we do not. We just scratch the surface here. If you really want to be an educated first home buyer, which we heartily encourage you to do so, you need to learn all of the steps and how to do everything in the right order.
Yeah, our First Home Buyer Guide course only costs $990, and you get direct access to us every week to help guide you through your negotiations. You can share links of properties you're thinking of buying, and we can help you work out whether it's A, B, or C grade or an absolute no-go zone. Trust me, you'll buy better with our guidance and you'll overpay by a lot more than $1,000 if you don't know what you're doing.
Oh my God, yeah.
In this episode, we've only touched on a tiny part of the huge amount of things you need to know to become an educated first home buyer. There is so much more for you to do. You can learn all of the steps in the right order and avoid all of the mistakes that others have made in our 10-step online course for first home buyers.
If you'd like to learn more about the right process and avoid making rookie errors, become an educated home buyer. Head over to the website, check out your first home buyer guide, the course that we have created for you. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss an episode. And if you've liked what you've heard today, please give us an iTunes review. It helps other people find us. And of course, I know it's a bit cringy, but we're going to ask for 5 stars. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you found this really useful. And if you have, please share the love with others who you know are in the same boat. We'll be back next week with more priceless stuff.